You swore you'd never do it. You watched them do it your whole life. You told yourself, not me, never me. And then last week, you caught yourself doing the exact same thing. Same tone, same words, same face. Maybe it's the way you sigh before you answer a question you didn't want asked. Maybe it's how you go quiet instead of saying what's actually bothering you. Maybe it's the way you raise your voice half a second before you even notice you're upset. You catch it in the mirror sometimes. Not your face. Your expression. The exact one your mother used to make, or the exact silence your father used to go into. And it hits you like a small betrayal. Because somewhere along the way, without signing up for it, without agreeing to it, you inherited something you spent years trying to reject. So here's the real question. Not, why do I do this? You already kind of know that. The real question is, how did it get inside you without you noticing? Here's the uncomfortable part. You didn't learn your parents' habits from what they taught you. You learned them from what they did, thousands of times, while you were too young to filter any of it. Think about it. Nobody sits a 5-year-old down and says, here's how to handle stress, shut down and go silent. Nobody teaches a 7-year-old, when you're scared, get defensive first. But you watched it, over and over, at the dinner table, in the car, during arguments you weren't even part of, just sitting in the next room, absorbing the temperature of the house. Your brain, at that age, wasn't taking notes like an adult would. It wasn't analyzing. It was doing something much more dangerous. It was building a template, a default setting for this is what a stressed person looks like. This is what love sounds like when it's tired. This is what disappointment does to a voice. And here's the part almost nobody says out loud. You didn't copy your parents because you admired them. You copied them because they were your first model of being a human being. And children don't get to choose their models. They just absorb whoever is closest, whoever is loudest, whoever controls whether they feel safe that day. This is why the habits you hate the most are often the ones tied to emotion, not logic. Nobody accidentally inherits their dad's taste in music. But people inherit his silence, his anger, his way of walking out of a room instead of finishing a sentence. Because emotional patterns aren't taught, they're transmitted. Like a frequency you didn't know you were tuned into. And there's a second layer to this, one that's even harder to accept. Some of the habits you hate weren't even your parents' fault originally. They got them from their parents. Who got them from theirs? You are not looking at your father's temper when he snaps. You're looking at a habit that might be 3, 4, 5 generations deep, passed down like a family heirloom nobody asked for and nobody knows how to return. Psychologists have a name for this. They call it intergenerational transmission, the quiet passing down of coping mechanisms, emotional reflexes, and communication styles from one generation to the next, mostly without anyone realizing it's happening. Nobody hands you a letter that says, here's how to deal with feeling powerless, control everything around you. But if that's what your grandfather did, and your father learned it from watching him, and you learned it from watching your father, then it's not really your habit at all. It's an old survival strategy wearing your face. Here's where it gets strange. The habits you hate in your parents usually weren't random. They were solutions. At some point, in some moment of stress, that habit worked. It protected them. It got them through something. Maybe your mother learned to control everything because chaos once cost her something she couldn't get back. Maybe your father learned to go silent because in his house, speaking up got him hurt. The habit you find so frustrating wasn't a flaw they chose. It was armor they built, and nobody ever taught them how to take the armor off. So they just kept wearing it. Even at the dinner table. Even with you. And this is the part that reframes everything. You didn't inherit their weakness. You inherited their old survival strategy, running in a life that doesn't need it anymore. That's why it feels so automatic, so involuntary. It's not really you choosing to snap, or shut down, or over-explain yourself, or apologize 5 times in a row. It's a very old system, built for a very different situation, firing off in a moment that doesn't actually require it. Which means the habit isn't proof that you're becoming them. It's proof that you're carrying something that was never fully yours to begin with. And for the first time in your family's history, you're the one close enough to actually notice it. That's new. Nobody before you had the awareness, the language, or the distance to say, wait, why do I do this? Your grandfather probably never asked that question. Your parents may have never asked it either. They just lived inside the pattern, thinking it was simply who they were. You're the first one standing outside it long enough to see the shape of the cage. And here's the twist most people miss: the fact that it bothers you, the fact that you hate seeing it in yourself, is not a sign that you failed to escape it. It's the sign that you're already halfway out. Because the people who are fully trapped in these patterns never notice them. They just repeat them, convinced it's simply how they are. The moment you feel the flinch of recognition, "Oh no, I just did the thing," that flinch is the exit door opening. Awareness is the first place in the entire chain, going back generations where the pattern becomes optional instead of automatic. You didn't choose the habits you inherited, but for the first time in your family line, you get to choose what happens after you notice them. That single second, between the old reflex firing and you deciding what to do next, that's the only inheritance that was ever really up to you. Everyone before you passed down the pattern without knowing it existed. You're the first one who gets to see it clearly enough to put it down.